In 1794, a new subsidy contract under which Prince William delivered 8,000 Hessian soldiers to England was granted. England had just joined the coalition against Napoleon in France. Rothschild and his business rivals were kept fully occupied in discounting the bills received from England in connection with this transaction. In the last decades of the 18th century, events profoundly affecting the course of all future history had taken place. The repercussions of the French Revolution were felt throughout Europe. The principle of equality, which the French Revolution proclaimed, aroused emotions of hope or dismay throughout the world according to the social and economic position of each individual. At that time, money was signified primarily by gold bullion or gold coins. Henceforth, arranging transfer of large amounts of gold was extremely dangerous. Much money was lost by sending gold via coach or boat from one country to another. In times of war, it was seized by the enemy. In times of peace, by thieves. The many exchange merchants and money changers employed by Prince William, whose word and signatures could replace physical transfers of gold, were worth the commissions they commanded. It was the job of the prince's court factors, whom Rothschild was made in 1769, to regulate these paper transactions. It was particularly important for the prince to have someone like Rothschild, far removed from the banking community, for discreet transfers of cash or for rapid conversions of foreign currency. During the middle years of the 1790s, Mayer's relationship with Landgrave William's chief treasurer, Carl Frederick Buderus, had become more substantial. Rothschild and Buderus created a partnership which was kept a secret from the Landgrave. This deal made Buderus a silent partner in Rothschild's Red Shield firm. Because it benefited Buderus for Rothschild to do more business with the Landgrave, Rothschild soon began doing more and more discounting for William, eventually having a virtual monopoly on all his business dealings. The military developments of the First Coalition War, in which the Rothschilds' princely customer was actively engaged, with varying fortunes, considerably increased in activity. Landgrave William adopted the attitude of an impartial observer of the warlike activities in Europe, and occupied himself principally in the profitable administration of his extensive possessions. He was no stranger to the authentic delights of avarice, and although he was already extremely wealthy, his appetite for increasing his wealth remained a constant obsession. The ruling Landgrave showed the greatest ingenuity in effecting savings of every kind, and spent all his spare time thinking out schemes for the profitable investment of the large cash resources which were accumulating in his treasury. He gradually became a banker to the whole world, and Mayer Amschel Rothschild was his favorite agent. However, the commercial activities of the House of Rothschild in Frankfurt itself were not limited to this one branch of business. The Red Shield firm took any chance of earning a profit, whether as commissions or in war supplies. The Rothschilds began dealing increasingly in war requirements such as cloth, foodstuffs, and wine. The cloth business in particular expanded greatly, and Mayer did not fail to use every opportunity for extending his connections with princes and potentates, even beyond the sphere of Landgrave William. The war profits realized at that time formed the foundation of the enormous fortune that was later built up by the House of Rothschild. Towards the end of the 18th century, the Rothschilds' wealth cannot have been far short of 1,000,000 gulden. The transfer of bills of exchange, cash payments, and the consignments of merchandise like cloth from England made it necessary to appoint a representative on the other side of the Channel. By 1794, Rothschild's oldest sons, Amschel, Solomon, and Nathan, ages 21, 20, and 17 respectively, were made partners in the Red Shield firm. They entered into a highly elaborate deed of partnership which provided that profits and losses should be divided between the partners according to a definite scheme. Mayer's oldest sons, Amschel and Solomon, were indispensable at the Frankfurt firm. The oldest son, Amschel, was a modest religious man and very conservative when it came to business practices. Starting in the late 1790s, he began acting as the firm's representative to Landgrave William, frequently visiting Kassel and often staying there for protracted amounts of time. Mayer's age was starting to wear on him, and so he would send Amschel to do business with William on his behalf. Mayer's second son, Solomon, had much of the same personality traits and worked next to his father in Frankfurt. It was decided that Rothschild's son Nathan, arguably the most talented when it came to money creation, was sent to England in 1798 at age 21. Nathan took as much ready money with him as was practicable, and the rest he had sent on after him. The capital which he brought with him to England amounted altogether to a sum of about £20,000, or £250,000 gulden. About a fifth of this sum was his own money, and the rest belonged to the business. The action of his father and brothers showed great confidence in this young man who did not even know the language of the country he was about to enter as a complete stranger. Their confidence was to be justified, however, for Nathan was destined to become the outstanding figure in the Rothschild business. Nathan arrived in Manchester with orders for British textiles from his father and continued to receive these by post. Having assessed the market to establish the quality and price of cloth available, he then proceeded to place these orders with manufacturers, not only those based in Manchester, but also from firms as far away as Nottingham, Leeds, Stockport, and Glasgow. The profit to be made in such a business took the form of simple percentages. However, at a time when profit margins in the textile industry could be as high as 20%, Nathan's charges were more modest. This was a deliberate ploy to attract customers and increase his market share. Nathan's initial capital rose from $20,000 to $60,000 in the first couple years in Manchester. As his business expanded and he began to export to firms other than his father's, Nathan began to offer not only low prices but also reasonable credit terms. His continental customers were generally expected to pay with bills falling due after 3 months, in effect 5 months, after the goods had been shipped and paid for by Nathan. The more Nathan could pay in cash, the less he could pay his suppliers. The more credit he could give his customers, the more customers he attracted. The frenetic, hustling atmosphere of these formative years was extremely chaotic. In a market crowded with numerous small businesses, subject to rapid fluctuations in prices and interest rates, and almost completely unregulated, it took a combination of burning aggression and cool calculation to strive and thrive. By 1806, Napoleon's star was on the rise. In that same year, the Berlin Decree banning British imports to the territories under French control was taking effect. This caused the businesses of many English merchants who sent their wares to the continent to collapse. The choice for firms like Nathan's was between inactivity and sanctions busting, with all the risks that entailed. Under these circumstances, Nathan therefore had little option but to carry on his export business illegally. He became, in a word, a smuggler. In 1806, Nathan married Hannah Barrett Cohen, daughter of Levi Barrett Cohen, a leading London merchant. It was with Cohen that Nathan undertook much of his smuggling business. Cohen encouraged his new son-in-law to widen the range of goods he exported to the continent to include Indian and Oriental products as well as British textiles. In 1807, he was sending a consignment of coffee to Sweden via Amsterdam using an American-registered ship and fake Dutch documents. This took an immense amount of ingenuity and skill. Of course, such shipments could not legally be insured, so the risks involved were very substantial, but so were the potential rewards. Over the next few years, Nathan's business of smuggling goods from England onto the continent became one of the biggest in Europe. This was merely a stepping stone, however, for by the start of the second decade of the 1800s, Nathan had made up his mind to become a full-fledged banker. Taking the dowry left to him by Hannah's father, along with the profits he made in the years spent as a textile merchant smuggler in Manchester, Nathan, at age 34, moved his business to London in July of 1811.